Hello everyone, I wanted to return with another in the bag. This one's going to be a slight bit different than the last one. I'm not just going to go with what I bag normally, but I'm also going to go through a few optional discs, and I'm going to start out with mentioning some putters. So this little bag here is separated into putters, mid-ranges, and fairway drivers. I don't throw anything really above speed 7 if I can help it. I'm going to start out with the putter mainly because the primary putter that I use is the Standard DX plastic Aviar, $8 each. I bought these on sale in multiples. I think 6 Aviars and a few others. Anyways, so this is what I use for putting practice, and this is the new basket I've been using for the past few months to replace the blue one that you might have recognized in my every opening video. That one eventually deteriorated to the point where I needed to get a replaced basket. But we're here to talk about my bag, not the basket per se. But I generally carry 3 to 4 putters, 3 mid-ranges, and 3 fairway drivers. That loadout might change slightly based on my needs for the particular place we're going to go, and over time certain discs have gone in and out of my bag as I've gotten replacements like a newer Aviar, etc., etc. So going to start out with, of course, the putter, Standard Avr. This one's in basically new condition, and I literally just putt with it. I don't really use it for approaches or anything other than putting per se. I try to use other discs for approaches. Though this one is really good for approaches because it's basically a straight shot, and my side yard here goes out to about 100 feet, and I can practice up shots and approaches towards the basket, or even running towards the basket, running it in. So I'm fairly adept at throwing a relatively straight disc. Next up is my Aviar3. This is an XT plastic, and it's more grippy, it's a little bit tougher, and I just love the profile and everything else about it. And this is probably my number 1 or 2 approach disc. This and the next disc are essentially what I use for approaches most of the time, and often I'll use it with my sidearm because a slightly stable to overstable disc is more forgiving when you're doing relatively high torque, low spin operation like a sidearm. But it's also great for backhand if you want to have it go towards the basket or towards your destination and slow down as it gets there. So Aviar3, A3, love this disc as well. The next disc here is essentially my Hydra. I bag this nearly all the time because it's not just a good floater disc, it's actually a decent approach disc. It basically throws flat for a longer distance than something like a dart or some of the other discs that I've thrown, without fading too hard and without turning too easily. So it's a little bit less stable than the numbers imply, and I would say a little bit more glidey than the numbers imply, but I've used this fairly often, not necessarily just around water. And I love the Hydra, and I will most of the time carry this even when I'm not in water. Last but not least in my putt and approach game is my Pig, Ricky Wysocki Tour Series Pig. This is actually in Pro plastic. This is actually driver Pro plastic. I mean, it's very tough, it's rigid, it's just shy of Star plastic, but I think it's even grippier than Star plastic. Plus, you know, like the Rhino, which you don't currently carry, this thumb track and the grip is absolutely insane. It feels really, really good. Now, the width or wing is closer to that you might expect of a mid-range, but it's the shape of the putter and doesn't have quite the glide or distance of a mid-range. But man, this is a great approach disc. This is probably the closest thing to a zone that Innova has, and I just absolutely love this thing. Ever since I went to the pro shop nearby at Spring Valley Disc Golf, picked this up in my hand, I was like, oh man, I gotta get this. And it's pink. I love pink pigs. I've got a friend, Sean, his mom was a big pig fanatic, and I just thought this was completely appropriate. A pig disc that's pink. I love it. I'm gonna go ahead and hit pause. All right, due to a technical glitch, I can't let the first clip run for longer than 10 minutes. Anyways, now let's go to the mid-ranges. This Manta, all right, so as you can kind of tell, I went from, you know, all my putters straight to somewhat unstable if you really rip on it, to overstable. Technically this is overstable, this Hydra, but it ends up being closer to flat and very overstable for a putter. I have a similar methodology with mid-ranges, but I start out with understable with my Manta. This is in Star Plastic. Everything else is going to be in Star Plastic or maybe even Champion based on what I need. But this is a mid-range. It's somewhat understable, slight fade at the end apparently, but in my hands it turns reliably. I haven't yet really used it as a roller per se, but I use this when I deliberately want to use turn in my disc, in my throw, and this disc does a really good job of that. What I've tended to rely on for my turning disc as a mid-range has been this Mako. This flies so straight and it turns predictably, but if I don't use a lot of power on it, it doesn't turn the way I think it should. That's why I would use something like an Aviar in a shorter distance. With that said, very straight flyer, and if I want it on hyzer or anti or straight, it basically does what I expect it to do as long as I throw it correctly. But that is a mainstay. That would be probably my favorite mid-range of all time is the Mako3, and I've thrown a lot of them, certainly from the end of the line. This is a Roc3. This is in Champion plastic. I'm not a fan of Champion plastic per se, but I'm coming to terms with it, you know, depending upon the somewhat less grip that it has. But this, fairly glidey, but does have reliable fade towards the end. It's somewhat turn resistant, not as much as I'd like, not as much as a pig in my opinion, but if I want to throw farther, closer to 200 feet, I can trust this to do that, but slow down more reliably towards the end and skip less than, say, a driver might. Not much to speak of in the mid-range department. Okay, and last but not least are my drivers, and in this loadout I have 3 of them, and of course my favorite driver of all time, the Leopard. This is in Star Plastic. This is replaced with the one that I had in Pro Plastic for a good year and a half that I gave to Sean. To me, this is a straight flyer when I throw it well. It's not the best for fading per se, but I don't want it to do that. This is a great tool for straight shots, or if I want to deliberately introduce turn into my throw so it'll curve and go a long way without necessarily turning into a roller. Again, when I throw this well, this is my best friend, basically. Can't say enough about the Leopard. Another disc that's made it into my lineup, my second Discmania disc behind the MD, which is another great mid-range that I love. This is the FD. I've got this in S-line plastic. This is really straight driver. I can make it turn if I want to. I can make it, you know, not turn if I want to. And again, if thrown correctly, I can get really good distance on this. About the same distance as the Leopard, but it's just more turn resistant. And I think if I can master the cross step, I can throw this farther than the Leopard. But this is my second FD. I lost the previous S-line FD that I had. There was a Foundling that I used for, I don't know, almost a year and loved it. And this is replaced it. It's brand new, so it's a little bit more overstable than the other one. But can't say enough about the FD. Really good default driver in my case, although I still rely on the Leopard probably more often. When I really want to rip it and go straight, I do that, and the amount of fade is fine with me. And last but not least within this current loadout is my TeeBird, another Star plastic disc. And this is great. This is almost like a whippet to me in terms of how it'll go straight for a good while, very turn resistant, relatively speaking, and it fades fairly hard. It's great for throwing in the wind, and this has been a good utility disc for me. And this is essentially what I throw or want to throw most of the time. These 10 discs will make it into my bag most of the time. That's going to wrap up this in the bag video. What I recorded is a bit long, so I split it up into 2 parts. Please come back tomorrow while I discuss some of my alternate disc options that I've used historically as well as recently, and why I use them in special situations, and I also explain why I use a smaller bag instead of a backpack for the most part. And I also go into detail as to why specifically I like this current bag that I use. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.